And now, the moment you've all been waiting for.
The UK, and I'm your host Tom Linden, broadcasting from North Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. Welcome to my show. You can now contact the show, of course, from anywhere in the world. Leave your comments for me. You can either text me or leave a voicemail message on the telephone number 0044 7825 406271. Please do let me know what you think of my show and make suggestions for subjects you would like me to cover in the future. At last, I have an email address too. It's simple enough. It's kprndbuk@gmail.com. So I look forward to all your comments. And why not tweet me at TomLinden0. That's the number 0, at TomLinden0. Don't forget to leave your name and location. As I say each week, all broadcastable texts and voicemails will be included in next week's show. And please don't forget to check out my blog. There's loads and loads of information I put on over the last couple of days, and more to come. And that's at ukprn.blogspot.co.uk, and I'll update it regularly, as I've said. Now on to Blizzard Survival's discount offer. BlizzardSurvival.com have a fantastic offer for you, the listener. They're offering a 20% discount on anything bought from their website, wherever you are in the world, from www.blizzardsurvival.com. The Blizzard Survival brand incorporates the new Reflex Cell material. It's become the new standard wherever thermal performance in a lightweight compact package is essential, and especially for military use, casualty care, emergency preparedness, disaster relief, personal survival, and any other outdoor activities, plus more. It's life-saving technology, and it's never been so affordable. They've brought a new exciting product out. It's the Blizzard Heat Blanket. It's insulated and active. Believe it or not, it's a warming system for the whole body. It utilizes 3-ply reflex cell material in a reflective insulated blanket with self-activating heating pads in it. They're in the front, the sides, and so on. And it's got an integral hood for head protection. Now is the time to visit www.blizzardsurvival.com, and all you have to do to get a 20% discount is enter the word PREPPER at the checkout. It is that simple. Thank you, Blizzard Survival. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN DB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Now then, I hope you're all well. I hope you've had a great week. I have. I've been out in the boat, done a bit of shooting, bit of fishing. I've had a great week. Now, last week I talked about bugging out. And not that I want to talk about the exact opposite. To be fair, bugging in. Many websites, blogs and forums have covered the topic of bugging out in great detail, and under the assumption that this will be necessarily is the escape plan for many of us when the proverbial shit hits the fan. This notion is predated upon the belief that escape and evasion is necessary for our immediate survival, and it will be a likely event that we must plan and prepare for now. I'm not disputing that, okay? However, nothing could be further from the real and actual truth, I think. This cherished myth is a deceptive and dangerous notion that has little peace in reality. I've long held a stance against the notion because it nearly in all cases and all situations is a bad idea with some real fatal results. Bugging out is embracing the refugee lifestyle. And that's a very bad idea. Refugees throughout history have fared really badly, suffered extreme hardship and deprivation, with not many surviving at the experience. And this is, it's a far better alternative, I think. The rejection of the bug-out mythology flies in the face of the so-called expert advice and theory being proposed by many websites and authors who are also very active in selling products and gear specifically orientated around this concept. You could say, quite rightly, that there is indeed an agenda at work here, but it is not one in your best interests. Hold on to your pockets and read a bit more. Bugging out entails leaving everything you are, and everything you own, and everything you use, day in and day out, and everything you cannot carry or transport with you, behind. Not only behind, but inaccessible, unusable, and abandoned. You know, potentially forever. How much of our lives and the things within our lives do we truly want to abandon? You will also leave behind all rules of normalcy, I would have thought, and the concept of plenty and abundance, which also means replacements and repair. Don't forget you'd leave behind laws, rules and behaviour, and of course expectations that we have to expect from one another within our society, both good and bad. Let's make a list of the things to put this reality into perspective. You will be leaving behind your job. That's your income, isn't it? Perhaps your wife, kids, your home, which of course represents shelter, your friends, therefore your support network, your contacts, other people you know, your bank accounts, well, that's your money, your credit, well, it'll be ruined, your retirement, well, your pension, your property and everything you own, everything you cannot carry with you, that is, your vehicles, except one perhaps, at least until the fuel tank is empty. Your future. That's your prospects, your employment, your credibility, your integrity. Don't forget things also left behind such as electricity, excuse me, running water, internet access, news and information, communications, telephone, and even a mobile network service. Oh, don't forget a warm and dry bed and other essentials, some more than others. You will also leave behind all expectations of normalcy, decency, morality, and expectations, i.e., a normal life, forever. More on that later. If you are dependent upon a job, it will be gone. You will either have been fired or made redundant, with a ruined reference for any future employment. You would not be able to pay your rent or your mortgage, or your utility bills, or any of your monthly obligations. If they've lapsed far enough, then you would be facing bankruptcy, or loss of your remaining assets, or at the very least their liquidation, if you still have them, in order to survive just a few more weeks. It's possible your kids or your wife could be gone, having abandoned you for abandoning them, or sucked up into the system by the welfare state or child protection services. Your marriage could be in ruins, your family and friends could disown you, but in any case, what would be left of your relationships could potentially be in complete tatters. Is it worthwhile? Well, I'll leave you to decide that. Your connections to society and civilization would also be destroyed, or certainly damaged, and perhaps beyond repair. In effect, you'd be cashing out, completely and perhaps forever, of the life you've lived and started over. Worthwhile? You decide. But you'd be alive, supposedly. In effect, bugging out will mean you will be totally abandoning your present life in exchange for huddling under a tree in the woods, trying to avoid hypothermia and starvation, wondering where your next meal will come from and how long you can hold out in your new reality. And whatever it is that you choose to run away from will still be there. This is perhaps the most overlooked point of it all. How long could you hold out? Not long. The reasons are many, but they are sound. The need to bug out is an exceedingly tiny reality, a future event that will which will probably never happen, but it is not a zero possibility. Nothing is, not even an alien invasion. Yet this topic still receives a ridiculous amount of attention despite its extremely low probability, which makes no sense at all. The reason is because escapism is thought to be a solution versus contributing to the problem. It's not, as the points above demonstrate. Running from whatever the problem is usually ensures that you are taking your problems with you. Only if your life is in immediate danger does running offer a better opportunity than staying put and dealing with the problem. Running does not make problems go away, it will very often make them much worse. Running is also thought of as being romantic, adventurous, and even brave in some circles. Taking on the world all by yourself while you're on the run is common in many themes in movies and books, but has nothing to do with real life, I would suggest. Running means you're in full-blown survival mode and all bets are off, including all notions of morality, right and wrong, doing the right thing, and what you can even reasonably expect to happen. Anything can happen if you run, and often do, because you are replacing all your security for a whole series of things unknown and insecure. Did you know that if you abandon the system, then the system will abandon you? Nobody much talks about this point, but it is true. You will find yourself outside of society, unhelped, unhelpable, unknown, disconnected, and even hated for being what you have now become. With no address or connections, no references, no family or friends, nothing with which to help connect you back into society, society will turn its back on you in fear, and you will be outside of all normal channels of help and assistance. You will be effectively cut off. This is a huge issue, but nobody ever mentions it. To the woods. Bugging out is usually assumed to mean to the woods, where survivors, patriots, militia, end-timers, and others will be making their last stand, apparently together, whether they like it or not, while roasting hot dogs and marshmallows. Instead, it will be the last man standing over a pile of rotted and half-eaten corpses, since the food and supplies and notions of living off the land will have died out with the last slaughtered deer to be found, and every survivor will have been hoping all along that nobody has turned them in for poaching. Campsites, caves, and hidey holes will become armed, dirty, and infested encampments of hungry and desperate men. The surviving women would have long since been forced into prostitution and slavery, all fighting over the remaining scraps to be found, and newcomers showing up, necessary, I would say, for their survival. Informants, traitors, thieves, murderers, rapists, and thugs will quickly become the defining characteristic, with the strongest ruling, or eating, the weak. Those who arrive first will potentially be better prepared to prey on the latecomers or the weak, so if you are still planning on trying this, get your seat at the table early. Think not. This is exactly what happens during civil wars and internal conflicts when a country turns against itself. The war in Bosnia saw tens of thousands of murders, rapes, and thefts as the people turned on each other. It was a fight for survival, for food, for weapons, for money, for women. It has happened all over the world, and it will happen again. Whether there is not enough to go around, and whenever there is strife, secrecy, and conflict, those involved will resort to whatever means or methods of survival that they have in order that they might survive another day, and by whatever means possible. It will be no picnic, no romantic retreat into the woods where faith, truth, righteousness, or rebellion will flourish and grow. Instead, it will be a bloodbath where the young, old, and weak succumb the quickest. I suggest you bring lots of Tabasco sauce, as it does make the meat taste better. Bugging out also means you are leaving the norms of society behind. These are the rules, the laws, restrictions and expectations that you have come to expect and largely appreciate, that govern human behaviour, I would suggest. Would-be dictators and gang leaders will spring forth from unlikely sources. Since there is nothing to hinder them, then they will allow themselves to be unhindered. Unrestrained, you will find the true nature of what your friends can really be. You'll soon regret not locking up the madcaps among you and taking away their weapons. If food or medical supplies are in short supply, then expect gang on gang, tribe on tribe warfare to begin. Expect slavery, torture, imprisonment and rape. Also expect the nearby communities, cities, towns and villages to become their prey, as theft, robbery and murder go hand in hand with their daily need for food and other things like fuel and medical supplies. Inversely, you could also expect smart and prepared communities to expel, exterminate and hunt down these refugees if things get out of hand, exacerbating an already bad situation. Forget for a moment the military or law enforcement going after these woodland refugees, a topic unto itself. The locals themselves will not be the helping hand that you may have naively come to expect, especially if you or your gang have already trod upon their welcome mat. They're trying to survive too, and live normal, unfettered lives as best they can. They don't need nor appreciate you coming along and messing things up. Camping out in their backyard or nearby forests will often pit you against them in violent and lethal ways, I would suggest. And they will be far more adept than you are at outlasting you, because they will have the infrastructure and social network to do so. Survivalism is only rarely about surviving in the woods. Rather, survivalism is about living and staying alive, and how you might do that while experiencing a few hardships. Bugging out to the woods to survive your end-time fantasies is going to be a quick path to death for the majority of people that try this route. There is a better alternative to this: staying alive. Bugging out is never quite what everyone expects or seems to think it is. Where living off the land and finding adequate nutrition and staying healthy is grossly overlooked. Many people claim that they can do it, yet return year after year from hunting empty-handed. Excuse me. When the beer runs out, they head home. Or when the food is bland or gone, they're beating tracks as fast as they can to the nearest restaurant. These survivalists and outdoorsmen will not survive their voluntary refugee status by bugging out, but they will, if they show up far from home, be a serious problem for the locals. You will burn up tremendous amounts of calories, as much as 3 to 4 times as normal, while trying to live off the land. Finding and building shelter, hunting, gathering food, water, providing heat, establishing security, working and walking for long hours at a time as well, will cause you to expend far more calories than you will end up taking in. Even if you are well supplied, you won't be for long. You cannot carry everything. You certainly cannot carry enough. Foraging for food will very rarely provide enough calories versus what you're expending while looking. You will quickly go into a calorie deficit, burning off fats and muscle as your body adapts to your new environment and demands. I've seen a lot of ill-informed discussion on nomadic lifestyle, whereas the individual or group is roaming about living off the land. This notion, I think, is pure rubbish, as it is calorie deficient, ill-advised for security reasons, and will increase the risk of injury and health issues. You will need to preserve calories, not expend them if you can. Calorie deficiency cannot last very long, mere days in most cases, before your health diminishes and your strength drops. You risk hypothermia, vitamin deficiencies, and a high risk of contracting illness and injury due to your weakened condition. Unless your nutritional needs are met and you are able to also stay warm and dry, avoiding hypothermia, which is a core temperature drop, and frostbite, which is due to exposure, then it is just a matter of time before you become incapacitated, unable to help yourself effectively. There are countless examples of modern day survivalists who have found this out, believing that they could survive off the land and survive well, but lacking the skills and experience to do so. Additionally, our forests are not the cornucopia of food waiting to be plucked so many seem to think they are. They're vastly depleted monocultures of trees, lacking sufficient edible foods and wildlife. Some of these people wound up dead, others were found or rescued. All of them learned that foraging for sufficient nutrition and calories is why we have modern farms. It is by far the most efficient way of meeting our nutritional needs. Even growing your own food at home in a controlled environment, your garden, with a plentiful supply of soil, seeds, water, tools, and time is extremely difficult, if not nearly impossible for most of us, to meet all of our daily nutritional needs, all while leading a far less demanding lifestyle than living off in the woods in survival mode. I've long been advocating sustainable living and raising your own food, but here in the woods where I live, I cannot even grow half of the food I need to stay alive and healthy, let alone expect to hunt it down. Nor can I grow enough to feed my family, compounding the nutritional needs required. Bugging out is nearly in all cases a very bad idea, fraught with the danger and pitfalls, destined for failure and doomed for those that believe that this will be their answer to whatever they're running away from. It would be necessary in most extreme circumstances, and these are extremely rare, and for very extremely short periods of time for an extremely few skilled people. This rules out almost everyone else. You would need to return to civilization far sooner than many seem to be planning for. If you did not run off into the woods, you'd soon be back, as many Y2K refugees found out. Wouldn't it then be a better solution to avoid this unnecessary step altogether, if you could? Unfortunately, this then is the far better solution. Ultimately, bugging in. Back to safety, food, heat, clothing, medical attention, and survival. If you truly think that you foresee a need to bug out, then revise your plans to bug in to a new location within civilization where you can find work, food, clothing, shelter, safety and security, including an income, where your survival is a far more secure thing. This is the only long-term answer there really is. You will be in much better situations to deal with whatever the problem was in the first place that caused you to leave. Disappearing off into the woods is a dead end, and it will not work for the vast majority of people that would try this. You would have to come out sooner than you think if you survive and return to life within civilization somewhere. You're not going to live off the land indefinitely, and not even as long as you might think you will. So it makes far more sense in your escape plan to prepare for living someplace else instead. The entire concept of bugging out truly needs to be redeemed, refined, to fit within the parameters of reality and how this would really work for the vast majority of people. Leaving for reasons of safety, security, natural disasters, or some other valid reason is perfectly acceptable. But where you go and how you plan on surviving while you are there seems to be where this theory falls flat on its face against reality. Having the means to leave, but having some place to go where you can find safety, food, shelter and sustainability is the key to a true bug-out plan. Planning on disappearing into the woods is in all probability one of the worst ideas you could attempt. You would have to come out sooner or later, as I keep saying. You would be in a weakened, possibly sick or injured state, certainly broken, destitute and impoverished. A true self-made refugee. Basically, a dumb idea all round, one that should only be tried in the most extreme circumstances and only for the knowledgeable. You are listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN DB UK. I'm your host Tom Linden, And I'd like you to support these companies because the following companies have supported this station and I will continue to support them. Begin with, as usual, www.purifycup.com, www.purifycup.co.uk, and with the Purify Cup you'll never need to boil water again to make it safe for drinking. www.survivalmetrics.com for the 100% eye shield UV protection. Great to be used as an emergency set of sunglasses whether you're in the sea, at sea, or in a snow environment, or you've just lost your sunglasses and you want a replacement. www.combatparacord.com for top quality 550 paracord products from the Hawk. www.knifewarehouse.co.uk for a great selection of survival knives and survival kits. www.prepared-4 that's www.prepared-4.co.uk for the Nano Striker 5-starter. www.bushgear.co.uk for extremely tasty MX3 meals made for the French forces by real chefs, and I'm telling you, you can tell the difference. http www.lifesaversystems.com. They supply, amongst other things, the Lifesaver bottle, one filter of which will filter 4,000 litres of water. What a piece of kit. http www.survivaldepot.co.uk for the Knot Bone Lace Lock. You'll never need to tie your shoes or your boot laces again. And if you don't know what a Knot Bone Lace Lock is, check out www.survivaldepot.co.uk. www.survivalinfo.co.uk for the Wild and Edible Nutrition ebook. Tells you everything you can eat in the UK if it's green and doesn't have a face. http www.survivaldepot.co.uk again for the Browning Nightseeker Cap Light red, green and blue. This little device clips onto the brim of your hat, the corner of your pocket, or you can hold it in your hand. www.trueutility.com for a great range of multi-tools. The one I like is the Multi-Light multi-tool. www.ukcamo.com for the Gilly Kettle. Now the Gilly Kettle's the one that's got a steam whistle on it, so you can work around your camp and still know when your kettle's boiled. http blackbirdknives.com for Paul Scheiter's Blackbird SK5 survival knife, and a great range of survival information and leather sheaths at his other site, http www.hedgehogleatherworks.com. www.farsm.com for a great range of fireside outdoor meals, very filling and very tasty. www.dajoadventuregear.com for the Survivor knife. Comes complete with its own little survival kit and fits horizontally or vertically onto your belt. And now we have the Chris Kane Survival Companion. This really is a piece of work. You can get this Chris Kane Survival tool from chris-kane-survival.co.uk.
Touch that dial and die.
You are listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host Tom Linden. So, what is bugging in? Bugging in is basically hunkering down in your home until either the proverbial or literal storm passes. Why? Well, some cases are self-explanatory, aren't they? For example, if bad weather is on the way, you bug in. We've had several storms here where we've bugged in. I live in an area where trees come down frequently due to storms resulting in loss of power on an almost regular basis. There could be other potential scenarios where you would want to bug in. For example, if the economy completely collapsed, leading to social unrest, and you're in a good position in your home, you could bug in. I would prepare for these situations that I feel are most likely I'm going to face, and add to the preparations from there. So how do you prepare to bug in? Well, you start with the top 3 necessities of life, don't you? Food, water and shelter. I've covered food storage before, but as a refresher I'd like to start with a short-term preparation for approximately a week and build up from there. It's easy to start with extra canned goods like soups, tuna, beans, tomato sauce, pasta. Grab a coupon when they go on sale, stock up. Plan 3 meals a day per person for each day you think you could be bugged in. A basement is a good place to bug in if you have one. If not, maybe you have a room that you retreat to when a storm hits in the interior of your home. Maybe you have a storm shelter, or perhaps you live in flats with a basement. Wherever you are, pick the safest room and store your food and other bugger items there. Be sure to include a can opener, some paper plates, towels and utensils. I'd throw in some wipes that you can, clean your hands and face with. Don't forget, if you're going to cook and heat, you're going to have to consider that as well. And don't forget lighting. Food isn't all you'll want to store, of course. You'll need plenty of water too. Figure on 1 gallon per person per day as a minimum. If you're planning for short-term emergencies, you can store water bought from the supermarket and rotate it so it doesn't go bad. It does lose flavour and the containers degrade after about a year to the point where they get weak and begin to leak. You may want to store some water in 2-litre pop bottles to use for cleaning or flushing. If you're preparing for an emergency for longer than a week, I would add at least 1 water barrel to your storage and a good water filter like a purified cup or a lifesaver bottle. What about shelter? You want to shore up your shelter to the greatest extent possible depending on what you think you're facing. You should evaluate your shelter and, for endurance in the face of storms or floods and the degree invaders can penetrate your home, for example. Do you have what you need to protect your family in those situations? Perhaps you need more plywood to protect windows in the event of high floods, or maybe you need to install deadbolt locks on your doors and windows to try to get your home, a bit more secure. Now look at your home from a different perspective. Walk around your entire home to evaluate it. After the first 3 necessities are covered, what next? If at all possible, I would add a generator to your bug-in list of preps. It will help with the following elements and give you a degree of comfort. Light is another top need. If you lose power, you'll want to at least have 1 source of light. Make sure you have plenty of torches with extra batteries, and throw in a few lanterns as well, and it never hurts to have candles on hand. You also want to consider a supplemental source of heat or cooling depending on the climate and the season you're in. You could add a gas heater or a wood stove, for example, to your prep list, and in hot climates I'd be sure to have a battery operated fan or 2, again with extra batteries. Don't forget proper ventilation. Cooking will also be a major issue if you're bugged in for more than a few days. If you're in the market for a wood stove, get one with a flat top so you can cook on it. Get extra gas tanks for your barbecue grill. Another great idea is to pick up a cheap propane camper grill with extra little canisters of propane. Some charcoal grills are cheap and you can store bags of charcoal for a long time. Remember, always plan a backup to your backup in case your backup fails. If you think you could be bugged in for days, I would plan on a backup sanitation system. I plan to have a portable toilet. It's not much more than a 5 or 6 gallon bucket with a toilet seat on it, but it'll do. The great thing is you can buy biodegradable bags for it that are treated with chemicals to help take care of the other issues that go along with waste. Not only does the porta potty serve your bug-in needs, but you can take it with you if you have to bug out as well. Other considerations include adding activities and some fun foods for your family. You should also want to store first aid supplies, tools and other items like toiletries in your bug out room. There are many situations you can prepare for, and it can be overwhelming at times. Start with small steps to cover the basics, and each month try to tick another item on your list. If you can, start your bug-in plan with these items. You'll be well on your way to facing the next disaster. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Now I'd like to look at starting your own survival group. Survival team building will help and maybe even be vital if you can find one, then you can survive an apocalyptic event. An apocalypse can take many different forms, and have a team of people with you sounds a great idea. They've got varied skills, different ideas before, during and after the event, and they can help immensely. The first thing to start building is a team right now. The first thing you can do is find a group of like-minded people and talk to your friends and family. Explain that you're trying to build a team of people to help each other survive if a disaster happened. Many friends and family members may have skills about which you never knew that could be very helpful, or they may be closet preppers, people secretly preparing for a disaster. The next step is to start advertising online. The internet makes it easy to contact like-minded people for the purpose of survival team building. Posting ads on Craigslist, for example, or other websites is an excellent way to build survival groups. In the ad, explain clearly and coherently what you are trying to do and request that interested parties contact you. When you are survival team building, it is best to keep membership in the group local, since you may not have a reliable way to connect with the group members once a disaster event occurs. Many message boards, including Craigslist, have city-specific sections where you can post ads. Your local newspaper may also have places where you can run ads, and if your neighbourhood has a newsletter, you may also be able to place ads into it. While you are looking for members of your survivalist group, pay attention to the skills of your various group members. Some skills are particularly important, but it may be difficult to find people with those skills. For example, you will absolutely need a member with medical skills, such as a nurse or a doctor. Take some time to brainstorm what skills you will need to survive, and make it a priority as you do your survival team building to find people who can do those things. Important skills and knowledge, I would say, include first aid, cooking, physical fitness, gun knowledge, wilderness training. An additional benefit to those people in your group is that they can teach other group members. Once you find a survival team, you may find it helpful to organise your group through websites like Meetup or Yahoo groups. These sites allow you to easily post information that everyone in the group can see, exchange messages, and plan in-person meetings. Once you have assembled the group will need to meet in person. You can meet at someone's home or in a local pub, for example. Meeting in person will make it easier to talk and exchange ideas as well as learn skills from each other. When you meet with the survivalist group, you will have lots to do. You will need to make a plan about how to store and stockpile food and necessary supplies. You will also need to find a way to ensure that you have access to those supplies. Establishing a shelter is a good idea. You will also absolutely need to come up with a plan about what each member needs to do in the event of a disaster. And during group meetings, members with helpful skills can help train the other members. If nobody in the group has a necessary skill, either you can take classes as a group to develop that skill, or one person can take classes and become an expert, and then teach the rest of the group the relevant parts that are learned. Survival team building is an important and very helpful aspect of preparing for any disaster. It allows you to learn new skills and pool your resources and knowledge with other like-minded people. Here are some companies I'd further like you to support. http emergencyfoodstorage.co.uk for, amongst other things, a wonderful 72-hour survival pack that comes with survival kit that will long outlast the 72 hours. www.blizzardsurvival.com for the wonderful Blizzard Survival jacket. Don't forget there's a 20% discount at Blizzard Survival by putting the word prepper in at the checkout. http evac8, that's evaq8.co.uk for really nice and tasty survival ration packs. http www for adventuremedicalkits.com, that's www.adventuremedicalkits.com for the SOL Complete Survival Kit, which is a wonderful piece of kit and one of the best items to come out of last year, the SOL Bivy Bag, which is only 3.8 ounces in weight. It's waterproof, it's reusable, and fits in a stuffed sack. http HennessyHammock.com, I would say the best hammock in the world. www.edc.co.uk for simply your EDC supplier. www.web-text.co.uk for all your military equipment needs. www.Bicester Express. Now, Bicester Express do a range of new MREs, which are even available in petrol stations, and they're all very, very tasty. www.bushcrafttools.com for the most wonderful fire piston. It's a 2,000 to 3,000 year old idea, brought up to date by bushcrafttools.com. www.lookwhatwefound.co.uk. Great, honestly, great tasty MREs. On sale in Asda now, $1.99. A bit low in calorific content, but all supplied by regional farmers. http www.varusteleka, that's VARUSTELEKA.com, for the 95 Puko Finnish survival knife. What a great piece of kit. And lastly in this section, www.optimumnutrition.com for gold standard whey protein isolates, which are 90% pure protein by weight. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN-DB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Now then, I'd like to look at my top wild foods to gather in winter. Foraging through winter sounds like hard work. Well, it is colder, it's certainly wetter here in the UK. You think that it's a pretty thankless task, and while it's true that you'll want to wear a waterproof and a good pair of boots, it is surprising how many wild foods remain common throughout the dark winter months. That is especially true in these years of mild winters that we have now. And as I sit and rewrite this article in the middle of January, we still haven't had a proper frost. I'm still gathering sorrel and rocket. As the seasons get even warmer, that kind of winter forage will be more and more common. I'm not setting out to give an exhaustive list of things to gather through winter. I've just picked out some good, fairly common ones, a couple of fruits, some fungi and some greens. A balanced diet, eh? I hope that you, after reading this article, will feel encouraged to wander out, see what's going on. You will probably be very nicely surprised. Number one for me is the oyster mushroom. One of my favourite winter forages, although they can be found at any time of year. I've got a personal tradition of looking for as near as I can to the longest and shortest days of the year, and as often as not, if the summer's been wet, I'll manage that. Now that doesn't mean that oyster mushrooms are all hugely prolific all year. It isn't certainly the case. Usually the same log or tree stump doesn't have the mushrooms there. The habitat of the oyster mushroom that is fruiting on both days, more often it's a different patch. That's because individual patches seem to have different stress responses. You know, some to frost, dry spells, and generally it's a frost response that gets them going in winter. So look for them especially after a frost. Anything from 2 days to a week after a hard frost. If the weather has been a little more temperate, you can expect to find other oyster mushrooms fruiting. Use wild oyster mushrooms in the same way as shop-bought ones. They're tasty, textured, suited for stir-frying, soups and stews, I would say. Number two has got to be the good old nettle. I know what you're thinking, nettles in winter? Those unappealing dried up stems? But that isn't what I'm talking about, of course. Look more closely at the clumps of stinging nettle and you may be pleasantly surprised to see new fresh growth at and near the base. It will be intensely green, soft, Oh, still singy, okay? And lush, and it makes great eating. Gather your nettles with care. Wear gloves if you want when picking and preparing them, or you'll regret it, I would say. Wash them, remove any bits of old stem that are tough, and then cook them rather like spinach, adding a little nutmeg if you want, or use them in a soup. Very tasty and very nutritious. Third is chickweed. This is one of my favourite greens, and it can be found poking around the edge of fields, vegetable patches, pretty much anywhere there's disturbed ground. Its little white flowers and tiny green leaves belie the fact that this plant has a superb succulent texture and a flavour not unlike a cross between cress and spinach. I eat this one raw in salads more or less all year. It is of course especially useful in winter when there is so little else around. Mix it with some lettuce and sorrel and it's a great ingredient in a winter salad. Fourth for me is the dandelion, the good old dandelion. We all know the humble dandelion. Many people seem obsessed with eradicating it from their lawns and flower beds. But for me it's a welcome visitor. It's a tasty, productive and versatile little weed. Yeah, alright then. I don't like it when it's on my lawn, but it is. In winter you won't find many flowers, although keep your eye open and likely as not you'll find it flowering at any time. But you'll find plenty of leaves, and this is also the time to dig up the roots. The leaves will be a little bitter. Mix them with some good lettuce and sorrel in a salad and make sure that you sample your dandelion leaves before serving, just to make sure you haven't picked any really nasty ones. Serve the leaf salad with croutons and crispy fried slivers of bacon, and you've got a really filling little side dish. Dig the roots in early winter and give them a good clean. Then you can dry them in an oven, grind them up and roast them for dandelion coffee. I think it tastes a bit like French coffee with chicory, pre-sweetened and kind of milky. It's certainly not to my taste really, but it is a handy caffeine-free drink nonetheless. Alternatively, you can fry them in chunks in a little oil, add some soy sauce and cook them down till softened. Fifth, I think, is the rose. Rose hips start ripening in summer and through autumn and into winter. You'll find them slowly belting, softening due to the release of enzymes from the fruit itself. On the bushes, they're a superbly versatile fruit that is much underestimated and underutilized. I suspect due to the traumatization of an entire generation with awful sickly sweet rose hip syrup. Any quick web search will reveal dozens of recipes for rose hips, from the infamous syrup through to jellies, jams and puddings, all the way to some savoury favourites such as rose hip soup. Dried, they make a fine herbal tea. Just make sure that whatever you cook, you get rid of the seeds. Normally that's achieved by cooking to a pulp and straining, but make absolutely sure that you do not crush them, as that imparts a rather unpleasant bitter tang to the finished dish. Sixth for me is the ground elder. It is actually a weed. It's a common evil weed that is a nightmare to eradicate from your garden. It's a common feature on Radio 4's Gardener's Question Time. Panelists will discuss how exactly to eradicate it, and almost always the solution is to nuke it with glyphosate, except for Bob Flowerdew, who of course suggests that you keep digging it out for the rest of your life. I, however, would like to suggest a different solution. Eat it. With gusto. Sooner or later, probably later, if you keep taking the greens off it, it will die. The Romans, who grew ground elder as a vegetable, introduced this weed along with several other wild umbellifers to the British Isles. Until the late Middle Ages, it was found in vegetable and herb gardens all over the country, until the British decided they didn't really like vegetables with flavour and inexplicably went off it. And it is a superb green vegetable, but a sod to kill off. Use that to your advantage. Pick the young greens throughout the year, making the plants throw up more. Use the leaves in salad when they're young and soft, and cook them like cabbage, steam gently as they age. Even into winter, you'll find them growing happily in woodlands and hedgerows, and as long as you haven't got they're not too tough, they make fine eating. Seventh are Alexanders. Among the big leafy umbellifers, you'll find most especially around the coast but sporadically inland. Another Roman introduction. It is a biennial or short-lived perennial plant with seeds freely on cliffs in the hedgerows near the sea in much of the south of Britain. It's the tender pale green leaves that form rosettes after the flower stalks have been dried down in summer that you'll be picking throughout the winter. Be sparing, of course, and leave enough of the plant to see it through the harsh winter. Use it in the same way as ground elder, but if anything, it's even more aromatic. And lastly, a childhood favourite of mine, and I can remember many a sore stomach from eating too many, and that's a good old crab apple. You're familiar with crab apples, of course, and you know that ordinary apples look like. But did you ever go looking for crab apples in winter? It's astonishing how long the fruit cling to the trees, sometimes persisting until the storms of January knock them off. The sheer variety of apples you'll find growing wild is staggering, from hard little balls of acid right through to aromatic sweet-scented giants. You can find a range of apples growing wild right into winter. As long as they're intact, they'll be useful to you. Crab apples may be tart, you can say that again, but use that to your advantage. I like to stack them under a joint of pork, for example, mashing in with the juices at the end of the cooking process, maybe a little brown sugar to make a great roast apple sauce. I can soak them in gin with sugar and make a rather savage drink to take to parties, and they add in with rose hips or rowans to make a jelly. Be creative and you'll find no end of uses for them. Enjoy. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Having a plan, a bug-in plan, is a vital part of being prepared for emergency and survival situations. Two main strategies, as I said before, dominate the survival strategies within the prepper and survivalist movement. They're known as bugging in and bugging out. Bugging in, or bug-in, refers to strategically of having a capacity to deal with disrupted society or civil or crisis situations at home. Bugging out or bug out refers to the strategy of having the option to evaluate and evacuate if a situation would call for this approach. First of all, no plan is likely to survive its first encounter with reality. A bug-in plan can help you to deal with difficulties and emergencies, providing useful information and procedures for how to deal with different types of problems and critical information like maps, phone numbers. This is a suggestion for a framework that you can use when you make your own plan, but this is not a one-size-fits-all solution for making a bug-in plan. You may face several types of problems that are unique to your setting and situation. The plan that you make must be made for you, by you. Own the process. So let's look at facing an emergency. Natural disasters or man-made disasters can result in situations when one's life, health or property is at stake. A disaster can cause several problems for transportation, electricity, electronic communications, access to fuel, heating and other systems that mostly people rely on every day and they take, obviously, for granted. Most modern appliances like telephones, computers, lights, heating, refrigeration, air conditioning and even water pumps can cease to function in these types of scenarios. Bugging in refers to the tactic of minimizing the impact that such an event may have on you. Many situations do not have to result in a life or death situation if you simply have a plan and the means to deal with them. A disaster rarely disrupts all functions in a society, even if this is a possibility. Functions are often brought back relatively fast after a disaster. Power companies can often be able to make repairs relatively quickly. But some natural disasters like the 2006 tsunami, Hurricane Katrina, the Haiti earthquake and the recent extensive UK flooding are events that have affected and will continue to affect entire regions for long periods of time. Disasters can also have a long-lasting impact on local areas. In most cities, the survival situations, life may completely or partly keep on going as normal. School, work and other activities may continue, even if mass damage has been dealt to a community. The magnitude of disasters is not only total devastation or normality. Therefore, I suggest that you try to have a sliding scale approach in your bug-in plan. Normality. During everyday life, you can often get warnings, certainly early warnings, for potential disasters like flooding by following the news and your local weather forecast. How much time you should spend on following the events around the world is a matter of personal preference. You can just make a quick check every morning by having a weather application on your smartphone or computer, or you can spend basically an unlimited amount of time checking multiple international, regional and local news media. Check the weather forecast and the news every morning, I would suggest. Increase preparedness. Some types of disasters like storms, hurricanes and blizzards may be foreseen before they actually take place. In this case, an early warning may be given by authorities or other sources that may allow for preparations to be made. In these types of situations, it is, however, very common that people ignore or downplay the threat. It's hard for people to really perceive a hurricane as a threat if the warning is given several days before it hits, when the sun is shining and the weather is great. So follow the development of the situation, I suggest. Make a timeline for what information that you have received and at what time and from what source. Inform friends and family about the ongoing situation. Find out what you know about this type of situation or threat. Make some basic research to learn more about this type of situation and what you can do to minimize its potential impact. Check if there are any plans made by local, regional or national crisis management agencies for how to deal with this type of situation. At some situations, it can become clear that a situation will become a real problem and then it will affect you. In this case, you should make all the preparations that you can do to minimize the impact. You must continue to follow the development. Continue to make a timeline for the ongoing development. Check in with friends and family. How are they planning to deal with the situation? Do they require any help, or is there anything they can do to help you? Now is the time to make preparations to minimize the potential consequences. Check supplies, check your inventory. Is there something somewhere that you should increase? Bug in. A few types of scenarios may make it necessary to stay indoors in the home. A catastrophic pandemic, mass civil unrest, a blizzard, chemical, radioactive or nuclear release may make it necessary to stay indoors. This represents, I know, the most extreme action required. Most situations are not likely to require such drastic actions. Risk assessment. I suggest that as the first part in your bug-in plan, you should consider risk assessment. A risk assessment is an attempt to find and classify the risks in a systematical manner by trying to judge the potential consequences and how likely a certain risk is. This assessment will give you an idea of potential threats that you may face, how likely they are, and what consequences they might have. From this perspective, you can start to action in order to minimize the potential impact of the risks and acquire knowledge, skills and equipment that may allow you to cope with them in a better way. There are always going to be risks, and that may not be possible to see. But making an assessment that can help you to avoid some of the threats that you may face. Your setting will affect your vulnerability to these risks, your type of housing, how high your home is located above sea level, its insulation, etc. Dependencies on gas, electricity and other examples of factors that can make you vulnerable to certain types of risk. After you have made your risk assessment, it's time for you to ask yourself what kind of capacity that you want to have in order to deal with different kinds of emergencies or disasters. Here are some questions that I think will be relevant. How long do you think you may have to be able to cope without external assistance? What kinds of skills and knowledge may help you to overcome these events? What type of equipment and gear can be useful to deal with these events? What types of solutions is most effective for your specific setting and situation? Excuse me. How much of your time and income are you willing to invest in being prepared? In the second part of the plan, I suggest that you gather information about the members of your household, friends, and other people that are important to you. This information can help you get in contact with them and make you aware of potential medical needs that you may have or they may have during an emergency, or who you should contact if anything should happen. This list will need to include the home telephone numbers of these people, obviously the home address, the type of housing, mobile phone numbers, email address, work address and occupation, work phone number, date of birth, special medical needs, blood group, immunizations, known allergies, physical description, that's length, weight, height, hair, eyes. A photograph would be better. Skills in education, access to specific equipment, and what type of driver licenses they have and what type of vehicles they can operate. And don't forget, who should you contact if anything should happen to them? Write down the name of persons and contact information, again, telephone numbers, email addresses, and so on. I think you should have an SOP, standard operating procedures. Hasn't done the military any harm. How will you maintain your everyday needs like water, food, cooking, rubbish disposal, hygiene, sanitation, light, communications, emergency power during the type of risks that you have identified? I suggest that you create standard operating procedures, SOPs, or in other words, standardized solutions for how to deal with different types of needs. Here you can include preludes for anything from where and how you can gather and purify water, how you will prepare food without electricity, or gather information about an ongoing event. Examples of an SOP for a bug-in plan would be monitoring on an ongoing basis, create a timeline, what has happened, when did you receive this information, from what source did you receive this information, multiple sources, the media, radio, TV, local crisis management, agencies, etc. Communications with friends and family, mobile phone, social networks, CB or ham radio, landline, excuse me, CBRN management and preparedness, closing ventilation, closing doors and windows, using towels or tape to seal cracks around doors and windows, collecting and purifying water, extra water containers, water purification filters, water purification tablets, how much bleach to use in order to disinfect water, emergency toilets and hygiene routines. Some people using the same toilets where to put waste hand sanitation routines for how often to use and clean facilities. Loss of electrical power. Eat food that needs refrigeration first. Light sources. How to receive news. Battery powered radio or alternative solutions. Fire safety. That's fire escapes, fire drills, evacuation, fire alarms. What kind of type of extinguishers do you have? Where are they? Staying warm. Heaters, warm clothing, extra blankets, sleeping bags. And what about getting home? Disasters might strike at any time. Most people spend much of their time either at work, school, or some other type of daytime activity. If disaster strikes and you're far away from your home, it can be good to make preparations that may help you get back home. Get a get-home bag. This plan should not only be for you, but also for other members of the family. If you have children or elderly or disabled in the household, how were they going to be picked up and transported? I suggest that you make some meeting points, one primary and one secondary. Communications. Communications is another critical aspect. How would you communicate? Are you going to use a mobile phone or your landline? Social networks, email, CB radio, ham radio, they could be alternatives, couldn't they? Now then, your get-home bag. It's a tool designed to provide you with the tools you may need to deal with everyday problems, emergencies and situations when you have to make it back home during a disaster. Get a get-home bag because it may be that you have a bag you can use at this moment in time. Any old bag will do as long as it's strong. It should have additional equipment in it to cope with an emergency. Having a get-home bag can be a great resource, but in a worst-case scenario you may have to make do with the items you carry on your person, your EDC, your everyday carry. If you and your family members live close to a workplace, school or other types of day activities, getting everyone back home does not have to be a very complicated process. But if you work a long distance from home or possibly work in another area or town during the week, this may prove more difficult. How much effort you must put into this type of preparedness depends on your own situation. Getting back home during an ongoing crisis situation can be a very easy matter if you work very close to your home. Excuse me. But there are also people who commute long distances that may find them far away from home when a disaster strikes. Your everyday life must govern your own plans and efforts. I suggest that you take the following steps when you make your plan for getting home after an emergency. Start with making potential routes on maps from your workplace back to your home. Using markers with different colours, fluorescent markers are a good idea, so you can mark different routes to follow. Online tools like Google Maps can also help establish routes. Try to make, have a primary means of transport really, a vehicle. Try to have it available and a plan for a secondary means like public transport, a bicycle or walking. Add additional information to the route, okay? Where you can find potential shelters, access to water, gas stations, hospitals, hotels, motels, hostels, any hazards, any repair shops. Do you have any stashes on the way? Try to identify potential choke points like bridges and tunnels and potential ways round them. Identify key infrastructure on the routes that can possibly be affected by events. Bridges could possibly be damaged or collapse from an earthquake, and tunnels or roads can be flooded by a dam breaking or swollen river. You need a budget, of course. Having an emergency fund is also a vital part of your bug-in plan. A disaster can cause direct economic loss to your home and other belongings, and it may result in injury, or even destroy businesses and put people out of work. All these type of events require that you have some form of emergency funds that can be used to cover expenses like rent or fuel, food, medical bills. And having the proper form of medical insurance, well, that's another good idea. Insurances from your home that cover natural disasters like floods and storm damage, etc., are critical. Reducing your loans and debt are also actions that give you a more solid financial situation if you have to deal with an emergency. This budget may also be of great use for other situations like job loss, unexpected expenses and home repairs. I also suggest that you try to keep a medium amount of cash at hand so that you can pay for your needs if you're dependent on a credit card in case of a blackout. Make sure you have a safe place to store your cash and other valuables and important documents to prevent theft or loss of them through hazards like fire or flooding. A safe can be a good alternative if you can afford it. A bank safety deposit can be another alternative or complement. Having an inventory of your supplies makes it easy to know what you have available during a crisis, and this can help you plan and organize your preparedness efforts. There are many ways of organizing your inventory. One can be simply to list them, to organize them, like water and food, cooking, warmth, that would be blankets, sleeping bags and clothing, alternative form of heating, whether that's a stove, candles or a kerosene heater, medical supplies and first aid, lighting, equipment to start a fire, fire safety, cash, important documents and family photos, tools, equipment for repairs, emergency sanitation, hygiene, emergency generator, extension cords, spare parts and fuel, solar charges for batteries, etc. A disaster can temporarily disrupt the access to fuel and other types of transportation, so it can be vital to have a plan for how to deal with your day-to-day transportation needs and if there would be a need for transport a wounded friend or family member to hospital. I suggest that you both have a primary and secondary means of transport in your bug out plan. A primary means would be vehicle or a truck, for example. Examples of secondary would be motorcycles, bikes, walking, or public transport. Also make sure that you know what types of public transport is available in your area. Subways, buses, trains, airports, and make sure that you have phone numbers and contact information for these companies. Under vehicles, well, you've got primary means of transport, cars and truck, secondary public transport, bikes or walking. Fuel is one thing that often becomes scarce after a disaster and is used as fuel for vehicles, generators and heating. I suggest you try and keep at least the equivalent of a full tank of fuel for your vehicle available. Fuel is flammable, of course, and it must be stored safely. Make sure to check for any local bylaws and rules for storage. Fuel must also be rotated on a regular basis since it deteriorates over time. Diesel generally has a longer shelf life than petrol and of course a lower flammability. Having some spare parts and tools for repairs also available is a very good idea. In the appendix of the plan you can gather information like maps, city maps, road maps, topographical maps, sea charts if necessary and tide tables. Telephone numbers and addresses of hospitals, your GP, police, fire, the Red Cross, local government organisations, insurance companies, power companies, gas companies. Contact information to alternative forms of transport. As I've said, airports, trains, boats, subways, phone numbers, websites and addresses to the companies. Phone numbers and contact information for friends, people at work, contacts, etc. Write down the information. Articles, books and other types of reference materials, and any specific needs. Many people can have special needs, in a wheelchair or need that for getting around, glasses, insulin for diabetes, heart medication or hearing aids. Make sure that your plan does include these specific needs. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPR and DBU UK, and I'm your host Tom Linden. So, question is this: what do you think of this show so far? Now we've got some further companies for you to support. www.solostove.com. Now the Solo Stove is a great piece of kit because it burns natural fuel, so you never have to carry fuel around with you, which I think you'll agree is a brilliant idea. www.kaufman-mercantile.com for little 2-inch long solid steel US military quality EDC tools. www.nightgear.co.uk for the Highlander Trojan Hydration Pack, and it's a brilliant piece of kit, it really works. www.knifeman.co.uk for the Kuderman Heavy Duty Olive Oil Bushcraft Knife 111L. What a great knife, solid. http naturalspasupplies.co.uk for the most wonderful alum crystal and other natural products. I use the alum crystal as a deodorant substitute and it works very, very well. http www.outofdoors.co.uk for the Tool Logic Survival 11 credit card survival tool. Comes complete with a blade, a whistle, a fire starter and it's got an LED red light. http www.opticsplanet.com for the Black Hawk Web duty belt. Now this duty belt's got a lifetime guarantee, and no matter what I carry on it, whether it's a small multi-tool or the Chris Kane multi-tool, the Chris Kane survival tool, it stays upright, solid and firm. It's a great belt. and designed for life. http www.crkt.com for the Guppy multi-tool. This little Guppy multi-tool is wonderful to look at. It comes complete with a magnetic clip, and it's a great piece of kit. And lastly, http www.eagle-outdoors.co.uk for the Go Survival Pack. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. So, what have we got to do in the garden in January? Well, firstly, I'm not a gardener, but I know a guy who is, and I asked him what there is to do in January, and this is what he told me. Winter is truly here. As we enter the festive months of December and January, growth may be temporarily stalled, but you should still be enjoying lots of fresh vegetables. Weeds may still be growing though, so keep an eye on salad crops so they don't get overwhelmed. Take the time to record what you grew where in 2012 and use this as a basis for your 2013 plans. Things to do in the garden. Watch out for chickweed, which can grow, flower and ripen seed all year round. It is not a weed to be ignored and can soon overwhelm winter gardens and other plants. Particularly on rich soils, hoe off seedlings, but pull up anything larger as the plants can root again in wet weather. You can start forcing rhubarb, sea kale and chicory in January, apparently. Rhubarb is forced by placing an upturned bucket or pot over the plant to exclude the light. The warmer the environment, the quicker it will grow, and you can place manure or straw over the top to encourage growth of the pale, sweet roots. Sea kale is forced the same way, only there is no need for extra warmth. Chicory is treated differently. Dig up well-grown chicory roots from the ground, pot up and then cover with an upturned pot. Keep in the dark, in a warm place, 10 to 14 degrees, which is 50 to 57 degrees Fahrenheit. The sweet chickens, forced pale roots, will be ready for late winter salads in about 4 to 6 weeks. Whitloaf, never heard of a whitloaf, WITLOOF, is the traditional forcing chicory to produce white chickens. But other varieties can also be used, producing smaller and less regular chickens. If the compost is kept moist, the roots may produce several or more chickens after the first one has been snapped off to eat. Sow onions in January, so that's something you can be doing of positiveness, as onions may from seed may need a longer growing season. Raise in modules on a warm windowsill for planting out in March. Celery should have been lifted in December. Any plants left in the ground can be covered with a thick layer of straw to protect them from winter frost. Stake and earth up the Brussels sprouts plants that are at risk of blowing over in harsh weather. Loose soil around the roots leads to Brussels sprouts not hearting up properly. When you've got your seed potatoes, set them in a light, cool, frost-free spot and leave them to sprout. This is known as chitting. Egg boxes make a good chitting tray, so start saving them now. Make sure you pot the tubers with the eye end where the sprouts will grow upwards. I have to say, thanks to my mate John for that. Last year I did some chitting of my own. They were wonderful. The potatoes tasted great. I grew them in an old bath. Really, really nice. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host Tom Linden. Now I've got a treat for you. I'm going to tell you about my 3 favourite game recipes. The first one is very simple. It's a roast pheasant. You need for this 1 pheasant, half an onion, rasher of bacon, 100 grams of butter, lard, 1 slice of bread. And all you do is you take an oven ready pheasant, put a knob of butter and half an onion inside and a piece of bacon over the breast. I find streaky bacon's best for this, but it's up to you. Put some fat into a roasting tin and put it in the oven at 400F. When the fat is hot, put a piece of bread into the fat. It should brown in 2 minutes. Turn over the bread and put the pheasant on top. Cook for 45 minutes, basting when necessary. Serve with garlic with bread sauce, gravy, vegetables, and roast potatoes. Carve it as you would a roast chicken. Now, grilled partridge. A simple dish to prepare, yet really tasty. Takes about 10 minutes and about 15 minutes cooking time, and this serves 4 people. 4 young partridges, 3 tablespoons of olive oil, half a tablespoon each of ground coriander and ground cumin, small handful of freshly chopped parsley, a squeeze of lemon. Now preheat the grill to a medium heat, split the partridge open down the back. With a large knife pressed firmly down will do the trick, and splay it or spatchcock them. In other words, flatten them. Mix together the olive oil, coriander, cumin and seasoning in a large bowl and rub all over the birds. Grill them for about 10 minutes depending on the size, turning frequently, watching so as not to burn the bird. Sprinkle over the parsley and drizzle with lemon on top, and serve with seasonal greens and new potatoes. And lastly, venison and mushroom gravy. 2 venison steaks cut into bite-sized pieces, 1 can of creamed mushroom soup. I like the Campbell's one because it's condensed, therefore thicker. Half a soup tin of milk, 100 grams of butter, 2 cups of cooked rice, and salt and pepper to taste. And all you do is you heat the butter in a skillet, add the venison and cook until done, but don't overcook it. Remove the venison from the skillet, pour soup into the bowl and add the half can of milk. Blend this with a whisk until well mixed. Pour this into the skillet and mix together with the dripping in the skillet, and add the venison and cook until everything is heated through. Spoon the neat mixture over the cooked rice on the plate, salt and pepper to taste. And I hope you enjoy those 3, because I certainly do. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN-DB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Now then, Robin Hood. The boundary of Barnsdale Forest starts at the River Don in the south. If you're not sure the River Don, remember Doncaster, which is the appropriate Northumbrian boundary, and continues to the River Aire in the north, which goes through Leeds, from Sheffield to Leeds. A quick look at the map of England will show that Loxley lies in the foothills of the Pennines, and the whole of central England was covered in forest. Loxley was in the centre of the massive forested region, where the hunting was at its best and the roads were at their most dangerous. We know that Robin Hood is linked with forest life, and the Sheriff of Nottingham at that time had jurisdiction over the over the central wooded area where Loxley was situated. Here is some of the best hunting anywhere in the country. Back in the time of Robin Hood, Loxley, Bradford, Stannington, and parts of Sheffield were in the manor of Hallam. Its boundaries extended to Conisborough and Penistone. In modern estate agent language, Hallam and Loxley were location, location, location. Here lay Rivalen Firth and Fulwood, which is now a modern housing estate. The name comes from the Anglo-Saxon full woodu, meaning a wet, marshy woodland, and the many streams, for example, River Rivalen, River Loxley, Porter Brook, Wyming Brook, and River Don provided support for many different species. Hallam Moor is ideal for grouse, and the whole area was a mixture of forest, open moors, and peat bogs. Nearby was Rivalen Firth, which was a vast pasturage forest, abounding with trees of fine growth, and some of the finest timber in England was to be found there. It is said that a squirrel could run from tree to tree for 7 miles in a straight line without going to ground. The trees were so large that on one occasion 2 men on horseback on either side of a felled tree could not see the top hat of the other man. The trunk was so large. One spread of the mighty oak provided shade for 250 cattle, quite a gift for shipbuilders. The hunting in the area was excellent, and as the seasons came round, the lord of the manor would invite his high-ranking friends, both of English and Scottish descent, to join him for the hunting and the hawking. At this time Hallam would have been thronged with men of rank who came to enjoy the sport with their host and his neighbouring squires. The consequence of this was that the village of Hallam grew and spread, and the farming provided employment for more people. In those days there was both red and black grouse, partridge, heron, curlew, hare, red deer, fallow deer, roe deer, wild boar, wolf, fox, badger, and perhaps otter. There were bears, wild bulls, as well as wild duck, pheasants, and partridge. In the nearby rural forest of the Peak there were so many deer that in 1148, on one occasion, when they charged, men and dogs were trampled to death. This is what home was like for Robin Hood. All these animals and birds would have been hunted with horse, hound, falcon, and hawk, which was the most ancient of sports in which kings, princes, nobles, squires, yeomen, and retainers were permitted to join. The manor of Hallam had a strong appeal to the sporting instincts of the Saxon noble, who was devoted to the pleasures of the chase, and it is unlikely that in any other part of the vast estates in England could the lord of the manor get such a variety of accessible sport, where all he could wish for as a sportsman surrounded the village in which his manor house stood. It is probable that in Saxon times there were many manors south of Hallam, that they could boast a grouse moor of similar size, except perhaps on the Welsh border extending into Millbank Forest and also in Devon. So then, the life of the woodsman and that of Robin Hood and his followers was one of plenty, with a variety of wild game available to be hunted for food. It seems also that this vast amount of free game was substantially enough to support all of Robin's followers, so that none starved at all. Now, if you did not already know, these forests do not exist anymore. They have all long gone. Left now are evergreen plantations supporting a completely different sort of flora and fauna altogether. It is very different now, and what with rural building and town and city creep, any woods that are left are small and mostly empty of game. That is certainly not enough to sustain a family, let alone a crowd. If you're planning to bug out, where will you go? It is often said by preppers and survivalists alike that they want and plan to head for the woods. I would ask, what woods? And what will you eat when you get there, along with hundreds or perhaps thousands of other people all seeking the same survival refuge? Where will you sleep? How will you secure your family and your resources? Could you actually defend your patch? This is one of the reasons why I intend to bug in. The choice is yours, okay? But just go to your intended survival location, spend a night or two there, and see what game there is around, and I think it will surprise you how little there is actually about. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN-DB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Basic survival skills. Well, let's look at fear. For anyone faced with a wilderness survival situation, fear is a normal reaction. Unless an emergency situation has been anticipated, fear is generally followed by panic, then pain, cold, thirst, hunger, fatigue, boredom, and loneliness. It is extremely important to calmly assess this situation and not allow these 7 enemies to interfere with your survival. Pain may often be ignored in a panic situation. Remember to deal with injuries immediately before they become even more serious. Cold lowers the ability to think, numbing the body and reducing the will to survive. Never allow yourself to stop moving or to fall asleep unless adequately sheltered. Dehydration is a common enemy in an emergency situation, and it must be ignored. It must not be ignored. It can dull your mind, cause you to overlook important survival information. Hunger is dangerous but seldom deadly. It may reduce your ability to think logically and increase your susceptibility to the effects of cold, pain, and fear. Fatigue is unavoidable in a situation Like a survival situation, so it is best to keep in mind that it can and will lower your mental ability. Remember that in an emergency situation, this is often the body's way of escaping a difficult situation. Boredom and loneliness are enemies, quite often unanticipated, and may lower the mind's ability to deal with the situation. Building a fire is the most important task when dealing with survival in the wilderness. Be sure to build yours in a sandy or rocky area or near a supply of sand and water as to avoid forest fires. The most common mistakes made by those attempting to build a fire are choosing poor tinder, failing to shield precious matches from the wind, and smothering the flames with too large pieces of fuel. The four most important factors when starting a fire are spark, tinder, fuel, oxygen. Waterproof strike anywhere matches are an option. Matches may be waterproofed by dipping them in nail polish. Store your matches in a waterproof container. A cigarette lighter is also a good way to produce a spark with or without fuel. The flint and steel method is the oldest and most reliable methods in fire starting. Aim the sparks at the tinder to produce a fire. The electric spark produced from a battery, of course, will ignite gasoline damped rags. Remove half the powder from a bullet and pour it into the tinder. Next, place a rag in the case of the gun and fire. The rag should ignite and then become placed in the tinder. Although the sun's rays can pass through a magnifying glass onto tinder, I don't think we get enough sun over here to try that one. Dry grass, paper or lint, petrol-soaked rags and dry bark are all forms of tinder. Place your tinder in a small pile resembling a teepee with the driest pieces at the bottom. Use a fire starter or a strip of pitch if it is available. Before building your shelter, be sure that the surrounding area provides the materials needed to build a good fire, a good water source and shelter from the wind. It is important to keep in mind that smaller pieces of kindling, such as twigs, bark, shavings, are necessary when trying to ignite larger pieces of fuel. Gather fuel before attempting to start your fire. Obviously, dry wood burns better, and wet or pitchy wood will create more smoke. Dense, dry wood will burn slow and hot. A well-ventilated fire will burn best. Natural shelters such as caves and overhanging cliffs. When exploring a possible shelter, tie a piece of string to the outer mouth of the cave to ensure that you're able to find your way out. Keep in mind that these caves may already be occupied, and if you do use a cave for shelter, build your fire near its mouth to prevent animals from entering. Enlarge the natural pit under a fallen tree and line it with bark or tree boughs. Near a rock or coastal area, build a rock shelter in the shape of a U, covering the roof with driftwood and a tarp or even seaweed for protection. A lean-to made with poles or fallen trees and a covering of plastic or boughs, thick grasses or bark is effective to shelter you from the wind, snow or rain. A wigwam can be constructed using 3 poles. Tie the tops of the poles together and upright them in an appropriate spot. Cover the sides with a tarp, boughs, rain gear or other suitable materials. Build a fire in the centre of the wigwam. Make a draft channel in the wall and a small hole in the top to allow the smoke to escape. If you find yourself on open terrain, a snow cave will provide good shelter. Build a drift and burrow the tunnel into the side for about 24 inches, then build your chamber. The entrance to the tunnel should lead to the lowest level of your chamber where the cooking and storage of equipment will be. Clothing must provide warmth and other protection from the elements. Layers of light natural fibers are best. Hats are a must, as they often provide protection from both heat and cold. Waterproof outer layers are necessary. Equipment must easily be manageable and promote survival in any situation. Items to carry in your pockets may include a fire starter, waterproof matches or a lighter, a pocket knife, goggles, compass, first aid kit, and some trail food. Items for your survival kit should be packed in a waterproof container that can double as a cooking pot and water receptacle and be attached to your belt. In addition to a survival kit, a good comfortable backpack is a must. Loads of about 18 kilos, 40 pounds are average. Items you should include are a torch, extra jacket, socks, gloves or mittens, a pocket saw, gas, camp stove, first aid kit, emergency food, and a tent with a fly sheet. A checklist should be made of the useful items to have: a map and a compass, a large bright plastic bag which will be useful as a shelter, signalling device, or in lieu of rain gear, a torch with extra batteries, extra food and water, extra clothing like rain gear, gloves, sweater, pants, sun protection such as sunglasses, sunscreen, a hat and a long sleeve shirt, a sharp survival knife, waterproof matches, a lighter or a flint, candles and a fire starter, first aid kit, a whistle, flares, a tarpaulin. Before venturing into the wilderness, check weather forecasts and hazards. You're listening to the UK Prepper Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Owl eyes, a core awareness skill. Picture an owl perched on a tree branch 25 feet above the ground, sitting there motionless with its eyes in a fixed gaze. The form we are gaining from the owl is that a wide peripheral vision stillness yields motion for the owl. When the owl holds perfectly still, all motions are evident. The bird language practitioner or tracker gains from this by practicing the same kind of stillness and wide-angle vision as demonstrated by the owl. To utilize the best owl eyes should be applied in combination with fox walking and other moving forms, and is exceptional practice at the quiet sit. Owls have developed eyes so big and so powerful that can actually outgrow their eye sockets and are frozen in place. Imagine that you are an owl. Look straight ahead and imagine that your eyeballs are stuck in your eye sockets and cannot move. Now look straight ahead. Wherever your body is facing, pick a spot directly across from you that you can train your eyes on without moving. Hold that spot in the center of your vision as your focal point. If your eyes wander off, bring them back to the focal point again. Always return to that one spot. While staring at the spot and without moving your eyeballs, notice that you can also see part of the ground or floor between you and the spot. And without moving your eyes, you can see part of the sky or ceiling between you and that spot. You can see the ground, the sky, and that spot all at the same time, using your peripheral vision. This is owl eyes. Build on this peripheral vision now by adding to your awareness the furthest thing you can see to the left and the furthest thing you can see to the right, all without moving your eyeballs. You can see these 5 things at once: your focal point, the ground, the sky, the extreme left and the extreme right. How to improve? Well, practice. From an early age, most of us have mostly utilized a narrow field vision. Reading words on a page, for example, mandates a tunneling of our vision. Therefore, the rods and cones within the retina allowing owl eyes to work have been physically exercised very little. Most likely, you will repeatedly slip back in and out of focused vision. Therefore, a conscious effort to practice owl eyes is crucial for interrogating this technique into your routines. Through practice, you will add your field of vision, literally expand. You'll see it do this, and it'll become a much larger area. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden.
Wow, radio couldn't get any better.
4 reasons to add a pellet gun to your survival gun arsenal. You heard that correct. I said a pellet gun. Yes, the kind powered by air. I have a good quality pellet air gun, and it's not just because I still have it from when I was a kid. I intentionally have it added to my survival kit for a very specific reason, which I have detailed below. If you've never considered a pellet gun as an air rifle option, as a survival rifle option, You might consider changing your mind after listening to this. As a student and instructor of survival living, I take my gun choices very seriously. I recommend a break barrel rifle, as this will never run out of air. Below are 4 reasons, in no particular order by the way, why a pellet gun deserves to be included in your survival rifle selection. A pellet gun is an excellent small game hunter, especially .22. It is a great weapon to take down small game. While people have taken larger game such as wild boar with air guns, they are best suited for small game. Hunting small game is perfect for any survivalist. Rabbit, squirrel, dove, quail, duck and the like are excellent food sources and are readily available in most of the country. With practice, hunting small game with a pellet gun is absolutely no problem. I have taken many small game animals with my .22 pellet gun. It requires better stalking skills, but I like that, and that is a good skill to learn anyway. It requires better stalking skills, yes, but it's also a good skill to hone in on. Hunting with a pellet gun will force you to be a better hunter, and it will also put dinner on the table. Secondly, the pellet gun's ammo is one of the most convincing reasons to have one on hand. Pellets, no matter the caliber, are very cheap. You can buy hundreds of pellets for just a few pounds. Spend £30 and you've got enough to last a lifetime of small game hunting. And if hell breaks loose, traditional ammunition will become increasingly difficult to get your hands on anyway, so buy it now. Not to mention that it will be ridiculously expensive. If the world we live in ever gets this way, why waste your ammunition on hunting squirrel or other wild game? That would be wasteful, wouldn't it? And careless. There is a smarter way. There is pellets. Thousands of pellets, by the way, fit into small spaces. Not only are pellets dirt cheap, they're very small. You can carry thousands of pellets and not even know they are there. You can store tens of thousands in just one shoebox. To top it off, pellets have a shelf life of pretty much, well, forever. Traditional ammunition can go bad over time, especially with the talks on giving ammunition an expiry date. Stocking up with a few pellets isn't a bad idea. Thirdly, an air weapon is a silent shooter, so forget the earplugs. These guns are silent. In many survival scenarios, a silent weapon is a good thing. Not only can you hunt without drawing attention to yourself and your family, but shooting a silent weapon often means you get off more than one shot if there are multiple targets. Both of these are positive. People pay thousands of pounds to make the gun silent at no extra charge for the pellet gun. Lastly, they're powered by air, and you don't have to buy air. And it's never going to be out of stock. For this reason, I prefer either a multi-pulp or a break barrel pellet air gun. I will in future sell my CO2 powered air gun and buy a break barrel. Needing to refill capsules or tanks doesn't make any sense in a survival situation. You want to keep it as old fashioned as possible. It's hand pump all the way for this survivalist. By the way, there are tons of options when it comes to hand pump and break barrel guns. They both come in 177 and 22. The foot-pounds per second varies depending on the gun, but all rifles should be close to 12 foot-pounds. So there you have it. 4 solid reasons why you should keep a pellet gun in your survival arsenal. You are listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host Tom Linden. Now some funny camping tips. Funny camping tip number 1. A hot rock placed in your sleeping bag will keep your feet warm. A hot enchilada works almost as well, but the cheese sticks between your toes. Camping tip number 2. A potato baked in the coals for 1 hour makes an excellent side dish. A potato baked in the coals for 3 hours makes an excellent hockey puck. Funny camping tip number 3. A 2-man pup tent does not include 2 men or a pup. Funny camping tip number 4. Given Or get even with a bear who raided your food by kicking his favourite stump apart and eating all the ants. Tip number 5. In emergency situations, you can survive in the wilderness by shooting small game with a slingshot made from the elastic band of your underwear. Tip number 6. Take this simple test to see if you qualify for solo camping. Shine a torch in one ear. If the beam shines at the other ear, do not go into the woods alone. Tip number 7. The best backpacks are named for national parks or mountain ranges. Stay clear of those named for landfalls. And finally, tip number 8. When camping, always wear a long sleeve shirt. It gives you something to wipe your nose on. Now then, preparing for a survival situation. Your mission as a person in a survival situation is to stay alive. You are going to experience an assortment of thoughts and emotions, and these can work for you or they can work to your downfall. Fear, anxiety, anger, frustration, guilt, depression and loneliness, they're all possible reactions to the many stresses common to survival. These reactions, when controlled in a healthy way, help you to increase a person's likelihood of surviving. They prompt the survivor to pay more attention in training, to fight back when scared, to take actions that ensure sustenance and security, to keep faith with his companions, and to strive against large odds. When the survivor cannot control these reactions in a healthy way, they can bring him to a standstill. Instead of rallying his internal resources, the person listens to his internal fears. This individual experiences psychological defeat long before he physically succumbs. Remember, survival is natural to everyone. Being unexpectedly thrust into a life and death situation of survival is not. Don't be afraid of your natural reactions to this unnatural situation. Prepare yourself to rule over these reactions so they serve your ultimate interest, staying alive. It involves preparation to ensure that your reaction in a survival setting is productive, not destructive. The challenge of survival has produced countless examples of heroism, courage and sacrifice. Excuse me. These are the quantities and qualities it can bring out of you if you've prepared yourself. Here are a few tips to help prepare you physically for survival. Know yourself. Through training, family and friends, take the time to discover who you are on the inside. Strengthen your stronger qualities and develop the areas that you know are necessary to survive. Anticipate your fears. Don't pretend that you will have no fears. Begin thinking about what would frighten you the most if forced to survive alone. Train in those areas of concern for you. The goal is not to eliminate the fear, but to build confidence in your ability to function despite your fears. Be realistic. Don't be afraid to make an honest appraisal of situations. See circumstances as they are, not as you want them to be. Keep your hopes and expectations within the estimate of the situation. When you go into a survival setting with unrealistic expectations, you may be laying the groundwork for bitter disappointment. Follow the adage, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It is much easier to adjust to pleasant surprises about one's unexpected good fortune than to be upset by one's unexpected harsh circumstances. Adopt a positive attitude. Learn to see the potential good in everything. Looking for the good not only boosts morale, it is also excellent in exercising your imagination and your creativity. Remind yourself what is at stake. Remember, failure to prepare yourself physically to cope with survival leads to reactions such as depression, carelessness, inattention, loss of confidence, poor decision making, and giving up really before the body gives in. At stake is your life and the lives of others who are depending on you to do your share. Through training and life experiences, Begin today to prepare yourself to cope with the rigors of survival. Demonstrating your skills in training will give you the confidence to call upon these skills should the need arise. Remember, the more realistic the training, the less overwhelming an actual survival situation will be. Learn stress management techniques. People under stress have a potential to panic if they're not well trained and not prepared psychologically to face whatever the circumstances may be. While we often cannot control the survival circumstances in which we find ourselves, it is within our ability to control our responses to these circumstances. Learning stress management techniques can enhance significantly your capability to remain calm and focus as to work to keep yourself and others alive. A good few techniques to develop include relaxation skills, time management skills, assertiveness skills, and cognitive restructuring skills. That's the ability basically to control how you view a situation. Remember, the will to survive can be considered to be the refusal to give up. Now I'd like to look at the birch tree. We've got them all over, haven't we? The slender white birch can be found growing on the hills and mountainsides in the most temperate areas of the far north. It is considered to be a small tree. Some birches are even classified as shrubs. With its distinctive white bark that is marked with fine horizon lines and a dark green triangular leaf with saw-toothed edges, put my teeth in. The bark, for which the teeth is best known, starts out smooth and silvery and then turns bright white as it matures. The bark also develops large black cracks as it ages. Now, for centuries, birch has been used to treat a large number of different maladies. Birch-based brews have been used to help cleanse the body of toxins or intestinal parasites. The leaves have been used to treat infections and skin irritations, and the buds have been used as diuretics to help with various bladder ailments. The wood coal has been used to help deal with toxins. The bark, ripped into bands and moistened with water, has even been used to help stabilize fractures. Here are some of the other things the birch has been used for: to combat diarrhea, constipation, intestinal parasites, flu, fever, colds, sinus problems, dizziness, dandruff, would you believe, allergies, poor circulation, liver problems, and urinary tract health. The birch tree has many amazing traditional healing properties, and recent medical research has shown that the leaves, buds, and bark of the birch do indeed have many beneficial substances that can lead to better health and well-being. The buds of the birch tree, for example, have been shown to have a higher vitamin C flavonoids and tannins, making them helpful in the prevention of viral infections and the formation of cancer. A decoction of birch buds has been shown to help increase urination and to aid in the abatement of oedemas. Perhaps the most exciting thing about the birch tree is a compound that is actually responsible for making the bark so white and shiny. The birch bark is rich in a compound known as butylin, a powdery substance that displays many valuable pharmacological properties. Studies have shown that butylin could be potentially effective in the treatment of skin cancer, respiratory syncytial virus, and pneumonia, which has been tested for its effectiveness against, believe it or not, HIV virus. The unique biology of butylin and betulinic acid has been known and shown to protect the liver from toxic chemicals and to help reduce the toxic effects of radiation and chemotherapy. It has also been shown that places where birch is abundant and the bark is used for many household items have displayed longer lifespan and less incidences of oncological disease, cancer. The birch has been prized for many centuries for both its aesthetic beauty as well as for its medicinal value. Throughout the regions where it grows, it has become a symbol of health, healing, renewal, and longevity, and modern research has shown that there is more than just a grain of truth to these myths surrounding this truly magnificent plant. Using birch brews or infusions can help cleanse the body, clear the skin, strengthen the hair, would you believe, and even reduce the risk of tumours. To treat diarrhea, birch bark tea is used. Use a teaspoon of ground birch bark and 8 ounces of boiling water. Allow the bark to steep for 15 minutes. Drink 3 cups spaced 4 hours apart to eliminate this health problem. You can address skin conditions with birch bark paste. Use sufficient water to cover the bark. Boil until soft and then mash it with a kitchen hammer or pestle. Apply the paste to sores, abrasions, inflammations, and repeat daily and watch for improved skin health within a week. Soothe sore muscles by rubbing them in birch oil, also called birch tar. Massage with the oil after exercise to reduce pain and stiffness. Repel insects as they carry disease. Believe it or not, it actually works against insects that can compromise your health. Use a birch bark extract. It has a high concentration of acid that wards off mosquitoes, gnats and other bugs. Combine 25 drops with 4 ounces of water. Use as a spray bottle and just distribute the mixture evenly over exposed skin. Accelerate hair growth by brewing a tea using 2 handfuls of birch leaves. After shampooing, use the tea as a final rinse. Massage into the scalp. You can also increase urination, as this is important for the overall health of the urinary tract and prevention of kidney and bladder stones. A brew of birch bark tea or a tincture made from 2.5 grams of birch bark leaves. Drink 1 cup of tea, 25 drops of tincture 3 times a day. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN-DB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden.
Get ready, it's the weekend!
What is the goal of EDC gear? The goal of EDC gear, I think, is to increase your quality of life. Every piece of EDC gear should be able to work toward that end. Using EDC to increase your quality of life is an ambitious goal, okay, but there are a variety of ways to achieve that goal. Your EDC gear can increase your quality of life. EDC, by the way, for those who don't know, is everyday carry. So let's look at what they can increase. Increase your self-reliance, increase your security, increase your comfort, increase your safety, and let's be honest, everybody's got different goals. People place varying amounts of emphasis on the different aspects that relate to quality of life. What is important to one could be trivial to another. Some people are supremely concerned about safety. Because of this, an investment in a defense tool would dramatically increase their quality of life. Others aren't that concerned about safety, but have something on hand to listen to or read makes their life more enjoyable. Some people gain supreme enjoyment from not having to rely on others. They have their pen ready when the cashier rips the receipt from the register. They have their torch ready when the power unexpectedly dies in the restaurant. Some people would go nuts if they didn't have a pen and a paper to write down an idea that popped into their heads. Some people are constantly worried about how they would cut a seat belt if they were in a vehicle accident, or how they would treat someone with a medical issue. Survival tools can help you alleviate those worries and dramatically increase their quality of life. Maybe you plead guilty to all of the above. Maybe you're thinking of something totally different that I didn't mention. Perfect. That's the idea. Think about your priorities. You will never be satisfied with EDC gear that caters for somebody else's needs, wants, and goals. It's easy to look at somebody else's gear and try to copy it for ourselves, but it's not the right way to go about it. You have an intricate combination of personal priorities that are different from everyone else in the world. excuse me, it takes some thought to arrange these priorities and properly apply them to your gear. We'll cover more of this later, but for now, go away and figure out what your goals are. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPR and DB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden. Disaster Survival Food Pantry Basics. Natural disasters are a reality that the entire world deals with, including hurricanes, floods, blizzards, and even simple short-term power cuts. It is important to be prepared in the kitchen. Those who are used to several severe weather storms each year most likely already have an emergency food plan in place. Find out what you can do to prepare your kitchen for natural disasters or any state of emergency with tips and recipes. You probably already stock most pantry basics needed to prepare for a disaster. You know, canned foods immediately come to mind, whether you carry your own or purchase commercially canned goods. Recent studies have found that modern canning methods can produce a product that is often more nutritious than the fresh counterpart. Vegetables canned in a liquid are excellent to have on hand in case of a water shortage, as a liquid can be used in place of fresh water to boil the vegetables. A variety of herbs and spices as well as salt are a necessity to doctor up self-stable foods or for whatever new creations your fertile mind can devise. Salt is also a nutritional necessity. Cooking oil will be needed for frying foods or making a roux to thicken sauces and stews. Olive oil will be fine unrefrigerated for months, indefinitely in cool weather. Mayonnaise in a jar is self-stable. You might want to stock up on small jars that can be used quickly. Although it has preservatives, it will separate after opening if not refrigerated, so keep it on ice. Flour and baking mix will last up to a year on the shelf, while sugar, salt and honey are everlasting as long as they are properly stored in sealed packages or waterproof containers. Pastas, rice and dried legumes have long shelf lives, but if your water supply is limited, they will do you no good. Dry cereals can be eaten without milk or with canned juice as a snack or a meal on a run, a sure kid pleaser. Pasteurised milk is now available in boxes which will keep in your cupboards for up to 6 months and come in handy for making quick sauces. Powdered and evaporated milk are further backups. Dehydrated onions and mushrooms, along with canned vegetables, are great for soups, stews, and even Dutch oven meals, with additional benefit of reducing the need for added salt due to the concentrated flavour. Dry soup bases and gravy mixes can also serve as a basis for soups and stews. Canned meats and seafood can be used in cold or hot dishes. Processed cheese, food and dry grated Parmesan and Romano cheeses are shelf stable and can fill in for cheese flavour. Are you prepared for a disaster? From severe flooding to blizzards in the winter, Mother Nature can take us by surprise. Take some time to think about your own emergency preparedness and disaster survival preparation. Usually in emergency situations, the power goes out and your refrigerator, your freezer and your oven become useless. If you're lucky enough to have a gas oven, you should still be able to cook, even with an electronic ignition. Check your manual and be sure to keep matches available, in a waterproof container of course. An outdoor grill can be a great appliance to use, but please do not use it indoors. Don't even use it in the garage. So what do you do if an electric stove or oven and the weather is too bad to grill? Well, you can rely on these following tips. Canned and dried foods can really come into the rescue in these situations. Purchase low sodium varieties and store them in a cool, dry place, making sure that you mark the purchase date on the product. And it's a simple case then of rotating it. Collect easy recipes that use these foods and store them right by the foods. along with basic utensils like a can opener, bowls, spoons, plates. There are lots of shelf-stable foods that are not canned. Look for juice boxes, stock and broth in boxes. Dried fruits and snack items and others that can be stored without refrigeration. As I said, rotate your stock of canned and dried foods occasionally to be sure your supply is fresh. Make sure you have the Parmesan cheese in the green can on hand. That cheese is meant to be stored at room temperature even after the package is opened, so it's great to have on hand in an emergency situation. Many fruits and vegetables will hold their quality at room temperature, so keep some of them on hand always. Apples, bananas, tomatoes, grapes, lettuce, squash, onions, potatoes, celery, peppers, and other products will store as well as long as they are stored in a cool, dark place. Water is an important staple, of course, not only for drinking but also for rehydrating dried foods, so keep a good supply of bottled water on hand for drinking, cooking, and even brushing your teeth. I reckon at least a gallon per day per person in the household is a bare minimum. Before the recent flooding, I used to recommend that we keep enough food on hand for 3 days. That's enough meals, by the way, but I think that's too little. After seeing how long the effects of the flooding lasted, I would recommend keeping at least 1 week of supplies on hand, and 2 would be better. In addition to food, your well-stocked pantry should include batteries, a radio, pet food, if your household includes pets, that is, lots of bottled water, torches or emergency lights, candles, the can opener. Don't forget the bottle opener for the beers, guys. Matches and any other prescription medicines your family needs. A first aid kit is a necessity. Think about storing extra clothes and blankets too. Remember to keep your mobile phone with you and make sure it's charged. Remember that if you don't have a source of cooling foods, you need to make just enough for you to eat within 1 to 2 hours. A cooler filled with ice is just fine for keeping foods cold, but it won't chill room or room temperature foods fast enough. So either eat all perishable food within 2 hours time or discard it. If the weather is safe enough, you can grill outdoors. You can make dinner packs with heavy duty foil, of course, and these one dish meals can be lifesavers and cleanup is minimal. I'd also recommend stocking paper plates, cups, napkins and plastic utensils. Look, I don't ordinarily recommend these because they're not environmentally friendly, but when you're faced with a water shortage, they make your life easier and I think safer too. So go to the next page on the recipe stack and we'll discuss this next week. For now, you're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRNDB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden.
The station takes S.
Now I'd like to look at some survival camping recipes. Here are some recipes for survivalists and preppers to experiment with various ways of cooking without utensils and have some fun at the same time. All these recipes are tried and tested and all are delicious. Finally, it must be stressed that all these recipes are tried on embers and not on high flamed fire. Some general rules to begin with. First, meat is easily grilled, skewered or done in a spit. Vegetables, well, some of them can be cooked in the jackets like onions and potatoes or threaded onto a skewer to make a kebab. Eggs, boiled in half an orange, in an onion, scraped out potatoes or skewered. Very tricky. Fish, well, I suggest wrapped in wet newspaper and placed directly on the embers, tied in on a green stick by the tail and stood up in the embers or done on a reflector. So potato, egg and onion. First of all, cut a lid off the onion and scoop out as much of the pulp that will easily enable you to accommodate your egg. Place the lid back on and fasten with a few tiny twigs. Place on the embers and your egg or potato onion will be ready in 20 to 30 minutes. Grilled eggplant, aubergine. Cut it in half and scoop out the seeds. Sprinkle with salt and pepper and place a knob of butter or margarine in the hollow. Put the halves in the embers, skin down, cook until tender, takes 10 or 15 minutes, and then eat out of the hardened skin. Baked potatoes in clay or tin foil. Well, firstly core an apple and stuff the centre with currants or dates or sultanas and butter. Wrap in greased tin foil and place in the embers. Cook for 10 to 15 minutes. If clay is used, by the way, it needs to be cooked for longer. Egg and an orange. Well, first of all, you cut an orange in half, scoop out the flesh inside and eat it. Be careful not to cut through the skin though. Then crack an egg into the skin and place it in the embers of the fire until the egg is cooked. Backwards mince. You can cook mincemeat inside all sorts of vegetable containers, including orange peel, hollowed out, potatoes, onions, hollowed out, gem squash, butternut, and even cabbage leaves. Now kebabs. Use a green stick to spear slices of bacon, mushrooms, sausage, carrot, tomato, peppers, and pieces of pork. Support the skewer over glowing embers, turn it occasionally, eat when the meat is crisp and golden brown. Cabbage hot dogs. Lay sliced onion on a cabbage leaf. Add a sausage or two and place more onions on top. Wrap in the cabbage leaf tightly and secure with a number of thin green sticks or cocktail stick type sticks. Place in the embers for about 7 to 10 minutes. Turn it occasionally. Now preparing fish. You will need to clean and gut your fish before you cook it, of course, and the fish should be cleaned as follows. Wash the fish thoroughly in water. Remove the scales by scraping with the back of a knife, not the sharp edge, and working from the tail towards the head, cut the spine at a point just behind the gills and tear the head off with a heavy, slow forward motion. If you're careful, the fish innards will come out of it with it. Slice the belly open from tail to gills and thoroughly cleanse the inside. Finally, cut the fins and tail and cook as desired. You can steam it by making a fire that is long enough for the length of fish and more than wide enough so let us burn down to a good bed of embers. Meanwhile, prepare the fish and clean it thoroughly. Cut a lot of grass to use for the steaming. If you cut it instead of pulling it, the grass will grow again. Place a good layer on top of the coals, place the fish on top of the grass, and place more grass on top of the fish. Then cover the fire and grass with earth and pack it down. Wait for 30 minutes and uncover, and you'll need to ensure that you have a good bed of embers to be successful, but it will taste fantastic. If you're on the seashore, by the way, use seaweed instead of grass. Other methods for fish include wrapping in cabbage leaf or grilled on a grid made from twigs, or pin the fish flesh side forward onto a plank of flat board and cook by reflecting heat from the fire. For real style, place a knob of butter on the fish when it is cooking and splatter it with lemon. Delicious. And now the pit oven. Dig a pit or use a natural depression in the ground. Light a fire in this and build it up, including as many rocks as you can find. Do not use flint or rocks from a riverbed, as the heat can cause them to explode from the water expanding inside them. Excuse me. When you have a good bed of embers, wrap your food up in leaves or in a bed of grass and cover the top of the hole with the sticks. Over this lay sacking or mats and then cover this with earth. Make sure they seal around the edges and leave for 2 hours and then uncover and enjoy. One tip though, if you're cooking for a larger number of people, then you've got to put more embers over the top of the fire to ensure top of the food to ensure it cooks properly. Now, I've mentioned this before a few times on previous shows. Boiling in a paper bag. It is possible to use a paper bag to boil water. The water inside will prevent the bag from burning. The trick is to ensure that the heat only touches the part of the bag that the liquid is in contact with so it can absorb the heat. Frying, well, you're going to need a form of pan or grill base. Using a flat stone which is prepared in the fire to heat it up, the stone is then cleaned off and food fried upon it. It may be necessary to place small pieces of twig around such things as eggs to stop them rolling off the stone, but I think you get the idea. Grilling. For this method you will need to make a grid or mesh out of green sticks and grill your food over hot bed of embers. Twists. Haha, I like twists. Make flour, water and a pinch of salt, mix them all together to form a thick dough. Add in raisins or tanners if you've got them, and make a snake-like roll of dough and twist this snake-like fashion over a thin green stick. Support it over the glowing embers, turning occasionally until it turns golden brown. Damper bread. Dough can be cooked on a flat rock in the fire. With some imagination you can make chapatis or mix in some baking powder or bicarbonate of soda and you make soda bread, one of my favourites from Northern Ireland. You're listening to the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN-DB UK and I'm your host Tom Linden. Small game hunting generally consists of closer range stalking and shooting than big game hunting, and it's a similar process. But most small game don't need decoys, calls or doe urine. Small game hunting is often as simple as finding the game, stalking it and shooting it. Different animals hide in different places, that's obvious. Some become familiar with the particular habits of the species you're hunting. Study the areas you'll be hunting in, off-season if possible. If you can't find game in the off-season, you're not likely to find the game in the same area once the hunting season starts. Locate the appropriate terrain. Rabbits, for example, like small patches of open ground surrounded by, or at least near to, good cover. Squirrels, on the other hand, prefer the cover of trees. When stalking, walk slowly through the habitat with your eyes peeled, stopping occasionally. The type of stalking is also dependent on the type of gun you're using. If you have a rifle, you can take longer shots, but if you have a harder time hitting moving animals. With a shotgun, you have lack of range, but you can more easily hit an animal that's been flushed. The best rifle shots are usually longer shots before the game has even seen you and when you are stalking them from a distance. There is time to set up, brace against a tree and squeeze off a careful shot. Practice at a range, of course, helps and does pay off in rifle shooting. Shotguns are generally shot at closer range, but quicker. Most shots with a shotgun will be at game that has just been flushed, whether by you or your dog. If you're hunting with a shotgun, keep the gun tucked into your shoulder so that you can snap it up into a shooting position in a second. Most of here in the UK, I would think we use air rifles to hunt with. Air rifles are guns that are pumped compressed air to shoot small pellets at high speeds. These pellets are fired with enough force that they can kill small animals like squirrels, rabbits and birds, and they are a perfect substitute for a real gun for hunting small game. The accuracy of air rifles is determined by a number of factors. The crown is the barrel lip, which must be the same size as the pellet so that they have a chance of travelling straight when fired. In general, lighter pellets travel faster and are less likely to be impacted by other factors such as wind. They are therefore better for small, quick game. Heavier pellets go slower but cause more damage, so are ideal for larger, slower targets. A strong enough wind will affect even the fastest pellet. Learn to lead your target or go upwind to ensure more accuracy in these cases. Also consider the temperature. Pellets will fly considerably faster through colder air than warmer air. Most airgun pellets are 177 or 22 and they travel about 1,000 feet per second, meaning a shot from one at close range is as powerful as a shot from most .22 caliber bullet rifles. These are weapons, these are not toys. While this could take out larger game if you shoot it just in the right place, the real game to hunt with an air rifle is, and will always be, squirrels, rabbits, birds and other small rodents. As with any type of hunting, air rifle hunting requires practice. But you do have one advantage over hunters who use other guns, and I've said it before, it's silence. There is no loud retort when a pellet gun fires to scare anything away. Oh, by the way, good hunting. Here are 2 bushcraft shows for you to attend this year. The first is the Bushcraft Show. It's jam-packed 3-day event filled with amazing bushcraft activities that will take you, your friends and family on a bushcraft and survival adventure that you'll never forget. Whether you come for the day or stay for the weekend, you can try your hand at woodcraft, fire lighting, shelter building, tracking, foraging, woodland games and so much more. Click onto their site at http://www.thebushcraftshow.co.uk for details of the event. And now the second one is the Wilderness Gathering that I attended last year. Fantastic event. If you've never been to the Wilderness Gathering before and you love nature and the outdoors, then it's a family show for you. The Wilderness Gathering. The original bushcraft show is a premier festival of bushcraft survival and primitive living skills. The gathering has also become a social event and brings together families and friends, also those interested in bushcraft and wilderness surviving skills, to enjoy a week of knowledge sharing in the relaxed and family friendly atmosphere. Yes, it is the original bushcraft show, and this year the 11th anniversary of the event. Exclusive to this weekend, ticket holders at the gathering is a 4-day event. Day visitors are welcome on the Friday, Saturday and Sunday. On site you will find leading bushcraft schools and an international band of professional instructors hosting introductory lessons on all kinds of skills, trade and demonstrator stands, acres of woodland to practice your skills in, and yes, individual campfires are permitted. 2 lakes plus a herd of North American bison. The gathering has established itself as the ideal outdoor family event of the year and is recognised as the original bushcraft show. It takes place between the 15th and the 18th of August in Wiltshire. For full details, log on to www.wildernessgathering.co.uk, and guess what? I will see you there. Blizzard Survival Discount Offer. Just let me go over this once again for you, please. It is such a fantastic offer from our friends at Blizzard that I think I've got to tell you again. Don't forget to go to blizzardsurvival.com to get 20% discount on all goods bought from them at www.blizzardsurvival.com, and all you have to do is enter the word prepper at the checkout. It's that simple. Thank you once again, Blizzard Survival. Now don't forget you can tweet me at TomLinden0, that's the number 0, TomLinden0. And somebody who's done that is Acme Approved. Thank you very much with your tweet. We love your podcast. Now let's just check out a few of the texts I've had this week. Brian in Scotland texted, great interview with Wade. Yes, thank you, Brian. He is a very interesting guy to talk to, and I think we'll have him back on the show. Anthony in London texted, really enjoyed listening to Mr. Hicks. Well, thank you, Anthony. You're not the only one there, mate. George in Redcar texted, I love your show. Keep up the good work. Thank you, George. That's very kind of you. Oh, by the way, thanks for listening, mate. And XX in Leeds texted, first time listener, enjoyable show. Well, XX, firstly I thought I'd received 2 kisses there. Welcome on board, and thank you for your text. And next time, tell me what XX is. Remember, you can text the show on 0044 7825 406271, or you can leave a voicemail on the same number, 0044 7825 406271. And whether you text or voicemail, please leave your name and location. I look forward to hearing from you. And don't forget my new email address, which is kprndbuk@gmail.com. Well, friends, that's it for this week. I really hope you enjoyed my show, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Maybe I'll be managed that horrible cold I'm stuck with at the moment. So don't forget, check out my blog, please, at http://ukprn.blogspot.co.uk. This is the UK Preppers Radio Network on KPRN-DB UK, and I'm your host, Tom Linden, wishing you all a safe and stress-free week. Bye-bye for now.